Oh, want to know the strangest thing about that whole year? I never once heard the human girl raise her voice. Not once. And I sat 2 rows behind her for 11 cycles. My name is Vel. I'm a Thren. We're the tall gray ones with the double-jointed hands, the ones you've probably seen sweeping decks or fixing coolant lines on the mid-tier stations. Nobody writes stories about us. That's fine. I'm not the story here. I'm just the one who watched it happen, and I'm the one who's still awake at odd hours thinking about it, so I suppose that makes me the one who tells it. Let me set the place for you first, because you have to understand the place to understand why what happened happened. The Academy sat on a moon we called Descent 6, though its real designation was longer and no one used it. It was a training school, not a soft one. The Coalition ran 40 of these across the arm of the galaxy, and Descent 6 was known as one of the hard ones. Cold. Thin air pumped through the dome so you always felt a little short of breath, like the moon itself was reminding you it never wanted you there. The corridors glowed a dull amber, always amber, and the light hummed. You stopped hearing the hum after a week. Then you left the school years later and couldn't sleep in silence ever again. The point of the Academy was simple. Take the young of 40 different species, cram them into the same halls, and turn them into officers who could serve on mixed crews without killing each other. The Coalition had learned the hard way that species don't naturally trust each other, so they built schools to force it early, while the young were still soft enough to bend. Some bent, some didn't. The human girl's name was Ada Sennett, Earthborn, which mattered, and I'll tell you why it mattered in a moment. She was small. Even by human standards, she was small, and humans are not large people to begin with. Brown skin, dark hair she kept tied back tight, and these steady eyes that didn't dart around the way most cadets' eyes did when they were new. New cadets always look like they're waiting to be hit. Ada didn't. She looked like she was waiting to understand. She was the only human in our intake year. 62 cadets, 1 human. And to most of the others, that made her a curiosity at best and a problem at worst. See, humans had a reputation on Descent 6, but it wasn't the reputation you'd expect. It wasn't fear. It was contempt. This was before the Kessel Line, before humans had done any of the things they later became known for. Back then, humanity was still new to the Coalition, maybe 2 generations in, and the older species looked at them the way you'd look at a child who wandered into an adult's council and started giving opinions. Earth was a backwater. Humans came from a single, fragile planet with a thin biosphere and a violent history, and everybody knew it, and everybody made sure the humans knew that everybody knew it. So when Ada Sennett walked into that intake hall on the first day, 61 pairs of eyes decided in about 4 seconds what she was going to be to them. And leading those 61 was Corvin. I have to tell you about Corvin because he's the other half of this. Corvin was a Drail, big, plated, the kind of species that's built for a heavier world and moves through lighter gravity like the whole room owes them something. Golden crest along the skull, voice like a slow landslide. And here's the thing you have to understand about him, the thing that made him dangerous instead of just unpleasant. Corvin was genuinely, effortlessly good at everything the Academy measured. Top of the combat sims, top of the tactics boards. His reflexes clocked in the 98th percentile across all 40 species. The instructors loved him. When they needed someone to demonstrate a technique to the class, they called Corvin up, and Corvin would do it perfectly, and then he'd smile that flat Drail smile that didn't reach anywhere near his eyes. They called him the Alpha Cadet, not officially. There's no such rank, but everyone used it, even the instructors sometimes, half joking. The Alpha. And Corvin wore it like it had been carved into his plating at birth. He didn't need to target Ada. That's what I could never explain to anyone afterward. He had everything. The talent, the rank that wasn't a rank, the crowd of hangers-on who laughed at whatever he said. Ada was no threat to any of it. She was quiet. She kept to the back. She did her work and went to her bunk and asked for nothing. But that was exactly it, I think. Looking back, she asked for nothing. She didn't try to earn Corvin's approval the way the other new cadets did, orbiting him, laughing too loud at his jokes. She just existed outside his gravity. And for someone like Corvin, someone who needed the whole room to bend toward him, a person who simply didn't bend was an insult he couldn't leave alone. It started small, it always does. First it was the mess hall. Ada would set her tray down, and by the time she came back with her water, someone had knocked it to the floor. "Sorry, Earthborn, didn't see you. You're kind of small." Laughter. Corvin wouldn't even be the one to do it. He was too smart for that, but it'd be one of his, and he'd be watching from across the hall with that flat smile. Then it was her gear. Her practice armor would come up short a strap. Her locker would jam. Little things. Things you couldn't prove and couldn't report without looking like you couldn't handle yourself, which at the academy was the worst thing you could look like. Ada never reported anything. She'd pick up her tray. She'd fix her strap with a spare she started carrying. She'd shoulder her locker open. And she never once gave Corvin the reaction he was hunting for. I watched all of it from 2 rows back. And I'll be honest with you, because this is the part I'm not proud of. I did nothing. I told myself it wasn't my business. I told myself the drail ran things, and a Thren who got in the way of a drail ended up scrubbing waste recycling for a season. I told myself Ada was handling it. All of those were true, and all of them were excuses, and I knew it even then. The instructors saw it too. That's the part that still sits wrong with me. They saw it. You don't run a school for 20 years and miss a thing like that. But there's a kind of seeing that isn't really seeing, where you notice a thing and then decide it's within the range of normal, and you move on because noticing it fully would mean doing something about it. The head teacher of our year was called Master Oru, a Sethite, one of the old, careful species, long-lived, slow-moving, with those layered eyes that see more of the spectrum than the rest of us. Oru had been teaching at Descent 6 longer than most of us had been alive, and Oru liked Corvin. I don't say that as an accusation exactly. It's just true. Corvin was the kind of student a teacher builds a career being proud of. When the review boards came through, Oru showed them Corvin's numbers. Corvin made Oru look good. So when the small signs were there, the tray, the locker, the way the room arranged itself around Ada like she was a stain everyone was politely stepping over, Oru's layered eyes registered all of it and filed it under cadets sorting themselves out. Hierarchy. Natural. The academy was supposed to produce a pecking order. That was half the point. Oru saw a strong student establishing dominance over a weak one, and Oru thought, this is the system working. Oru could not have been more wrong, and it would take a near disaster for that to become clear. Let me tell you about the day it started to turn. Not the climax, that came later, and I'll get there. But the day I first understood that Ada Sennett was not what any of us thought she was. It was a survival exercise. They ran these every few cycles. Drop a squad of cadets on the surface of Descent 6, the actual surface, outside the domes in pressure suits, and give them a problem to solve before their air ran low. The surface of that moon is a gray nothing. Rock and dust and a sky the color of old iron, and a cold so deep that a suit breach doesn't kill you slow, it kills you in about 90 seconds. The squad that day was 8 cadets. Corvin led it, of course. Ada was on it. So was I, which is the only reason I saw what I saw with my own eyes instead of hearing it secondhand. The problem they gave us was a navigation puzzle. A beacon somewhere out in the gray, a route that looked simple on the map but wasn't, because the map didn't show the crevasse fields, and the crevasse fields were how the academy taught you that maps lie. You had to read the ground. You had to slow down and read the ground. Corvin didn't slow down. Corvin never slowed down for anything. He set a hard pace toward the beacon, straight line. And the squad followed because Corvin was the alpha, and following the alpha was what your body did before your mind caught up. Ada didn't follow. She stopped. About 200 meters out, she just stopped and knelt and put her gloved hand flat on the gray dust. I was near enough to see her do it. I thought she'd frozen up. First real exercise on the surface, nerves, it happens, cadets lock. Then her voice came over the squad channel. Quiet, level, that voice I'd never once heard her raise. "The ground's wrong up ahead," she said. "There's a void field. Corvin, hold the pace." Corvin didn't even answer. He laughed, you could hear it, this short landslide bark, and he said something like, "The Earthborn's scared of the dark," and he kept going, and the squad kept going with him. Ada stayed kneeling, And I don't know why, to this day I don't fully know why, I stopped too. Maybe because I was closest to her. Maybe because some part of me was tired of always moving with the herd. I stopped and I knelt next to her and I said, "What did you feel?" She didn't look at me, she was watching the squad move away. "Vibration," she said. "Through the glove, the dust ahead of them isn't sitting the way this dust sits, it's got air under it. There's a hollow. I want you to understand something. No instructor had taught us that. Reading ground vibration through a suit glove, on a moon we'd been on for a handful of cycles, that wasn't in any manual. That was something Ada Sennett had figured out by herself, by paying attention, by being quiet and watching and feeling while the rest of us were busy performing for each other." The squad hit the void field 40 seconds later. The ground opened under the third cadet in line, a Volt, one of the skittering four-armed ones, and she went down into a crevasse that the dust had hidden completely. The whole squad scattered. Panic on the channel, everyone shouting over everyone, and Corvin's landslide voice trying to take control, and not managing it because control is easy when nothing's wrong and hard when everything is. Ada was already moving. She didn't run at the crevasse. Running at a crevasse on that surface is how you make two victims instead of one. She went low, flat, spread her weight across the treacherous ground like she'd done it 100 times, and she talked the whole way calm, this steady stream of instructions. Nobody moved toward her. "Vel, get the line from your kit. Corvin, anchor, you're the heaviest, plant and brace." And here's the thing, Corvin did it. In that moment, with everything falling apart, the Alpha Cadet took an order from the Earthborn girl without even thinking, because her voice was the only steady thing on that channel, and your body follows steady when steady is all there is. They got the Volt out. Ada rigged the line, went partway down herself to reach the cadet, and the rest of us hauled. It took maybe 4 minutes. 4 minutes that felt like a season. When the Volt came up over the lip, all 4 arms shaking, her air warning already chiming, nobody said anything for a long moment. Just breathing on the channel. Then Corvin's voice. "Lucky guess," he said. And he stood up and brushed the gray dust off his plating, and started walking toward the beacon again like nothing had happened. And the squad followed him. Because he was still the Alpha, and one bad moment doesn't undo years of being told who's above and who's below. But I saw something on that surface. I saw Ada Sennett, kneeling in the gray, hand flat on the dust, reading a world nobody had taught her to read. And I knew the way you know a thing in your gut before your mind has words for it, that we had all misunderstood what she was. She wasn't weak. She wasn't small. She was patient. And there is nothing in the galaxy more dangerous than a patient thing that everyone has decided is harmless. We got back inside the dome that day, and the exercise went into the record as a success, technically, since we reached the beacon and nobody died. Corvin got the leadership credit. Squad leaders always get the credit. There was one line in the report about a surface hazard successfully navigated. One line. No name attached to who navigated it. Ada didn't say a word about it. Didn't go to the instructors, didn't correct the record, didn't ask for the credit she'd earned. She hung up her surface suit and went to her bunk, and the next day she was back in the mess hall setting down her tray, and someone knocked it to the floor, and she picked it up. I couldn't understand it. I asked her once, later when I'd started sitting near her, when I'd stopped pretending it wasn't my business. I asked her why she never fought back, why she never reported anything, why she let them. She thought about it for a long time. Ada always thought before she answered. And then she said something I've carried with me ever since. "On Earth," she said, "we have this thing. When you're up against someone bigger than you and stronger than you and everyone's on their side, you don't win by being louder. You win by outlasting. You let them spend everything trying to break you, and you just don't break. And then one day they look up and realize they've spent all their strength and you've barely started." She picked at her food for a second. "My grandmother told me that," she said. "She grew up in a hard place. She said the loud ones burn out. The quiet ones inherit the room." I didn't fully understand it then. I do now. Because here's what none of us knew, not me, not Corvin, not Master Oru with his careful layered eyes that saw everything and understood nothing. Ada Sennett was not spending that year surviving Corvin. She was studying him. Every time he knocked her down, she learned how he moved. Every time his crowd laughed, she learned who in that crowd laughed a half-second late. The ones who didn't really mean it. The ones who could be turned. Every time Corvin took a credit that wasn't his, she filed it away, quiet, patient, the way she'd filed away the feel of wrong ground under her glove. She was building a map, not of the moon, of him. And the thing about a map is that the person who has it always knows the terrain better than the person who doesn't. Corvin thought he was the terrain. He thought he was the fixed thing everyone else had to navigate around. He never once considered that he was being navigated. The cycles ground on. Winter came to Descent 6, not that the moon had seasons, but the Academy called the long dark stretch winter, because the parent planet eclipsed the distant sun for 40 days, and the domes ran on stored power, and everyone's mood went gray to match the sky. Winter was when it got worse. Cabin-locked, 62 young predators of 40 species crammed into amber-lit corridors with nothing to do but train and eat and rank each other. Corvin thrived in winter. It was his season. The walls closed in and made his gravity stronger, and Ada's stillness stood out sharper against it, and he pressed harder. It stopped being trays on the floor. There was an incident in the sparring hall. Unarmed combat rotations. Everyone cycled through, paired against everyone else, and the pairings were supposed to be random, but Corvin had ways of arranging things. He got himself paired with Ada. The instructor overseeing that day was a junior one, easily impressed, the kind who saw Corvin and saw a highlight for the review board. It wasn't a fair match and everyone knew it. Drail against human, plating against skin. 98th percentile reflexes against a girl who'd never placed top 10 in a single combat metric because she never tried to. Corvin didn't spar her, he hurt her. There's a difference and every fighter knows it. A spar has a rhythm, a give and take, a respect. What Corvin did was drop the rhythm and just start landing hard in the places that don't show bruises through a training suit. The junior instructor called it good aggression, called it Corvin pressing his advantage, told Ada to defend better. Ada took it, covered up, weathered it, and when the round ended she bowed the way the forms required and walked off the mat without a limp because she wouldn't give him the limp. But I saw her hands shaking when she thought no one was looking, and I saw the look in her steady eyes, and it wasn't fear. It was the last piece of the map clicking into place. That was the day I think she decided. Not to fight back. She'd never do that, not the way Corvin wanted, not on his terms, but to end it, on hers. She came to me that night. First time she'd ever sought me out. Found me in the maintenance bay where I liked to hide from the crowds, and she sat down across from me and she said, "Vel, you watch things. You've watched all of it. I need to ask you something and I need you to tell me the truth." I said okay. She said how many of them actually like him, really, not the ones who follow because he's on top. The ones who'd follow him if he weren't. I had to think about it. I'd never thought about it that way, and when I did think about it, the answer surprised me. Almost none of them, I said slowly. They follow him because it's safer than not following him, but I don't think many of them actually like him. Ada nodded, like I'd confirmed something she already knew but needed to hear out loud. "That's what I thought," she said. "That's the whole thing. His power isn't real. It's just fear wearing a crown. And fear only works until someone shows the room it doesn't have to be afraid." She stood up to go, and at the door she stopped, and she looked back, and for the first time in 11 cycles I saw Ada Sennett almost smile. "The head teacher thinks Corvin's the strong one," she said. "He's going to realize he was wrong. I just need to pick the right moment to show him." Then she was gone, back into the amberlit corridors, small and quiet and patient as ever. And I sat in the maintenance bay for a long time after, feeling the hum of the walls, thinking about grandmothers in hard places, thinking about quiet things that inherit the room. Winter deepened. The moment was coming. None of us knew what it would be, or when, or how completely it would rearrange everything we thought we understood about strength. But it was coming. I could feel it, the way Ada felt wrong ground through a glove. Something was under the surface, and it was hollow, and Corvin was walking straight toward it, laughing, brushing the dust off his plating, certain as he'd ever been of anything that the ground would hold. The moment came at the trials. I have to explain the trials because if you don't understand what they were, you won't understand why what Ada did landed the way it did. Every year at the end of winter, when the parent planet finally slid off the sun and the light came back to Descent 6, the Academy held the trials. It was the big one. The event the whole year built toward. Instructors from other schools came. Coalition officers came. Real ones, decorated ones. The kind whose attention could make or break a cadet's whole future. And the review board came, all of them, sitting in a raised gallery above the main hall with their layered eyes and their datapads, and their power to decide who rose and who was quietly washed out. The trials were where reputations became records, where the Alpha Cadet got officially crowned in everything but name. And Corvin had been building toward his trials for years. This was his moment. He knew it. We all knew it. He was going to walk into that hall in front of the review board and the visiting officers, and he was going to be perfect, the way he was always perfect, and he was going to walk out with his future locked in gold. The centerpiece of the trials was the command scenario. They'd run a full tactical simulation, a real one in the big immersion chamber, the kind that reads your neural response and adapts to it. A crew, a crisis, a series of impossible choices, all of it playing out in real time while the review board watched every decision you made. Squad leaders ran the scenarios, and Corvin, as the Alpha, got the hardest one, the prestige slot. The one designed to be nearly unwinnable, because the board didn't want to see you win. They wanted to see how you lost. Here's the part Corvin didn't know. The scenario that year was a rescue. A crippled transport, losing atmosphere, crew trapped, and a hostile force closing in. Classic no-win architecture. You can't save everyone, you can't hold the position, and every choice costs someone. The board wanted to see how a leader handled the weight of that, whether he'd sacrifice the few for the many, whether he'd hold discipline when the Sims started screaming at him with simulated deaths. And the immersion chamber only took one cadet at a time in the command seat, but it took a full squad in the supporting roles. Real cadets, feeding the leader information, executing the leader's orders, being the crew. Ada Sennett was assigned to Corvin's support squad. I don't know if she arranged that. I've wondered. Ada had ways of being where she needed to be that I never fully mapped, but I don't think she arranged it. I think the Academy did it to her, one more time, one last time, put the small, quiet Earthborn girl in the background of the Alpha's big moment, a piece of set dressing for his triumph. They had no idea what they'd done. The morning of the trials, the main hall was fuller than I'd ever seen it. The amber light was up bright for once, the walls scrubbed, every cadet in dress kit standing in ranks. The review board sat up in the gallery. The visiting officers filled the side tiers, and among them, I remember this, was a human officer. First human officer any of us had ever seen. A coalition captain, decorated, sitting quiet among the older species with a stillness I recognized, because I'd been watching that same stillness in a girl 2 rows ahead of me for a whole year. Nobody made anything of the human captain being there. Why would they? Just a curiosity, just set dressing. Master Oru presided. He stood at the front of the hall in his formal layers, and he called the command scenario, and he called Corvin's name, and Corvin rose from the ranks and walked to the immersion chamber like it had been waiting his whole life to hold him. His crowd watched him go with that mix of envy and relief that came from knowing they were safe as long as they stayed in his orbit. His support squad filed in behind him. Ada last, small in her dress kit, eyes steady, hands still. The chamber sealed. The big display above the hall lit up so the whole gallery could watch the scenario unfold. And it began. I'll tell you, for the first stretch, Corvin was magnificent. I won't pretend otherwise. This is the thing about him, the thing that made all of it so much worse. He was genuinely gifted. The crippled transport, the closing hostiles, the crew screaming for orders. Corvin read it fast and moved faster. He barked commands. He held position. He made the hard calls. sacrificed a simulated crew pod to buy time, and the board's layered eyes tracked every second of it, and I could see even from the floor that they were impressed. He was doing exactly what the scenario was built to reward. His support squad executed, Ada among them, feeding him readouts calm, doing her small job in the background of his triumph. And then the scenario turned. Because that's what these scenarios do. They let you climb, they let you feel like you've got it, and then they pull the ground out. The transport's core went critical, not on the schedule Corvin had planned for. Early. The sim threw it at him early and ugly, and suddenly the calculus changed. The transport was going to blow, and the timeline to evacuate the remaining crew was shorter than the timeline to reach them, and there was no clean answer. There was only a choice about who died. This was the real test. This was the whole point. How do you carry it when there's no right move? And Corvin froze. I want to be careful how I say this because it's the hinge the whole story turns on. He didn't panic loudly. He didn't scream. It was worse than that and quieter. He just locked. The command seat went silent. The crew and the sim were calling for orders and the seat gave them nothing. Because Corvin, the alpha, the 98th percentile, the boy who'd been perfect his whole life, Corvin had never in his life been in a situation he couldn't dominate his way out of. And a no-win scenario cannot be dominated. It can only be carried. And he did not know how to carry anything because no one had ever made him. The seconds stretched. The board watched the Alpha Cadet freeze in his prestige slot with the whole galaxy's future officers looking on. And a quiet voice came over the sim channel. Reroute auxiliary power to the aft pods. We can't reach the crew, but we can seal them. Buy them 90 seconds. I'll take the manual override. It was Ada. She'd stepped out of her support role. Broken protocol. Support crew don't give commands. That's an automatic mark against you. The board notes it. She stepped out of the background and she started running the scenario from a seat that wasn't the command seat. And she did it in that level voice I'd never once heard raised. The same voice that had knelt on the gray surface and read wrong ground through a glove. Aft pod ceiling, she said. Corvin, I need the command authorization for the override. Just the authorization. Give me the code. And here's the thing. Here's the thing that makes me believe in her more than anything else in this whole story. She didn't take his seat. She could have. In that frozen moment, she could have shoved the alpha aside and run the whole thing herself and let him drown in front of the board. That would have been the loud win, the satisfying one. A whole year of trays on the floor and bruises that didn't show, paid back in one perfect public humiliation. She didn't. She kept him in the seat. She asked him for the authorization, gave him a small thing he could still do, a way to be part of the save instead of just the wreckage of it. She ran the scenario and she carried him through it at the same time. And Corvin, shaking, gave her the code. What happened next, the board would talk about for years. Ada took the override and she ran the unwinnable scenario, and she didn't win it. You can't win it, that's the design, but she carried it. She got the sealed pods out. She held discipline while the sim screamed. She made the hard sacrifice cleanly and she made the crew understand why. And when the transport finally blew and the sim went dark, she'd saved more of the simulated crew than the scenario had ever been solved for. More than the scenario had ever been solved for. The board pulled the records afterward. No cadet, in the 20-year history of that scenario, had gotten as many out as the small, quiet Earthborn girl who'd started the run as background set dressing. The chamber unsealed. The hall was dead silent. Corvin came out first. And this is the image I'll carry to the end of my days. The Alpha Cadet, the golden-crested pride of Descent 6, walking out of that chamber gray-faced and hollow, and not one cadet in that hall reaching for him. Not one. His whole crowd, all those hangers on who'd laughed a half-second late for a year, they didn't move toward him, because the thing holding them in his orbit had never been love. It had been fear, and they just watched the fear break. Fear wearing a crown, and someone had shown the room it didn't have to be afraid. Ada came out last, small, still, hands steady, and she didn't gloat, she didn't even look at Corvin. She just walked back to her place in the ranks like she'd done her small job and was ready to do the next one. Now, Master Oru. I've saved him for here because his part is the part that gives this whole thing its name. The head teacher realized too late. That's the truth of it. And I watched the realizing happen on his ancient layered face in real time. For a full year, Oru had watched the trays hit the floor and filed it under cadets sorting themselves out. He'd watched the sparring hall and called it good aggression. He'd watched Corvin take credit that wasn't his and thought, this is a strong student establishing dominance. This is the system working. Oru had looked at Ada Senate and seen weakness. Had seen a small, fragile Earthborn thing at the bottom of the pecking order, exactly where the natural order put her. And he'd let the strong press the weak, because that was what the academy was supposed to teach. He had it exactly backwards, and he'd had it backwards for a year. And now, standing in front of the review board and the visiting officers and the whole assembled hall, Master Oru understood, all at once, too late, what he'd actually been watching all year. He hadn't been watching a strong cadet dominate a weak one. He'd been watching a weak cadet in a gold crest torment a strong one, and he'd been calling it order the entire time. He'd graded Corvin's whole year as strength when it was nothing but noise. He'd graded Ada's whole year as weakness when it was the deepest discipline he'd ever failed to see. Every mark in his records, every credit assigned, every judgment he'd made about who these two young people were, all of it wrong. For a year, in front of a school that trusted his layered eyes to see truly. I watched it hit him. He was old, Oru, older than the whole hall put together, and I watched his careful face go still in a way I'd never seen. Not the stillness of Ada's discipline. The stillness of a person recalculating their entire understanding of something in one terrible instant. And then give him this at least, give the old Sethite this. Oru did the thing that was hard. He stepped forward in front of everyone. In front of the board he'd spent the year making proud with Corvin's numbers. And he spoke, and his slow, slow voice was not steady the way it always was. I have made an error, Master Oru said. For a full year I have watched this year's intake, and I congratulated myself on my reading of it. I marked strength where there was only volume. I marked weakness where there was, in fact, the strongest cadet I have taught in 40 years. He turned his layered eyes toward the ranks, toward the small, still figure standing quiet in them. Cadet Senate, I did not see you. That is my failure, not yours, and I am too old to pretend it is anything else. You could have heard a breath drop in that hall. The human captain in the visiting tier, the decorated one, the first human officer any of us had ever seen, stood up. Didn't say anything. Just stood in the old form of respect that crosses every species, the one that means I witnessed this. And one by one, up in the gallery, the review board stood too. For Ada. For the Earthborn girl who'd started her trials as set dressing in someone else's triumph. And the cadets my year, all 62 of us, we stood last and we stood slowest because we had the most to be ashamed of. We'd watched the trays hit the floor. We'd laughed a half-second late. We'd followed the fear because it was safer than not. And now we stood, every species of us, for the one person who'd never asked us to. I stood too. And I'll tell you, my double-jointed Thren hands were shaking the way I'd once seen hers shake, and for the same reason. Not fear. The end of something. The end of a year of being the kind of person who does nothing. Ada let us stand for her. She didn't wave it off, didn't shrink from it, didn't pretend she hadn't earned it. She just accepted it the way she accepted everything, quiet, steady, present. And then, when it had gone on long enough, she gave the smallest nod and the hall sat and the trials moved on. Corvin washed out. Not that day. The academy doesn't do things that fast, but the ground had gone out from under him and it never came back. The crowd that had orbited him drifted off within a cycle because the fear was gone and there had been nothing else holding them. He finished his time at Descent 6 as just another cadet, a gifted one, a talented one, but the crown was gone and everyone had watched it go. Last I heard he took a posting somewhere quiet and mid-tier and was, by all accounts, unremarkable, which for someone like Corvin was its own kind of ending. The loud ones burn out. Her grandmother had it right. Ada rose. Of course she rose. She rose the way she'd done everything, without seeming to try, without asking, just being so plainly what the job needed that the job came to her. The human captain took an interest. Doors opened. And the last I knew of Ada Sennett directly, she'd made officer years ahead of the curve and was serving on a mixed crew, 40 species, the exact thing the Academy had been built to produce, and the crews that served under her from every corner of the arm would follow her anywhere. Not because they feared her, that was the whole point, that was always the whole point. Because they trusted her, because she was steady when everything else was screaming, because she'd carry them through the no-win the way she'd carried Corvin through it, keeping them in the seat, giving them the small thing they could still do, saving more of them than the scenario was ever solved for. I stayed a Thrin, stayed the tall gray one nobody writes stories about. I did my time and took my postings, and I've swept my share of decks and fixed my share of coolant lines. That's fine. I told you at the start, I'm not the story. I'm just the one who watched it happen and couldn't stop thinking about it. But I'll tell you what that year taught me, and it's the thing I've tried to live by ever since, in my small, gray, unremarkable way. We all thought strength was the loud thing, the plating and the crest, the 98th percentile, the crowd and the crown and the landslide voice. We spent a whole year bowing to it. And the strongest person any of us ever met spent that same year picking her tray up off the floor without a word, reading wrong ground through a glove, studying the terrain we were all too busy performing to see. Master Oru realized it too late to unmark a single one of those grades, too late to give Ada back the year we'd all taken from her, too late for everything except the one thing that mattered, which was standing up in front of the whole hall and saying it out loud. I did not see you. That is my failure. Most people never get even that far. Most people go their whole lives calling the loud thing strength and never once look at the quiet one in the back and wonder what it's really made of. So here's the line I've carried, the thing Ada's grandmother knew, that Ada knew. That an old Sethite teacher learned one instant too late, and I learned watching from 2 rows back. The loud ones wear the crown, the quiet ones inherit the room, and by the time the loud ones look up and understand the difference, it's already hers.